Thank you, Lamin. That's the end of the panel presentation. I think we'll now open it up for discussions and questions for the panelists. And so we open for any questions here.
The first contribution I would like to make is on Professor Jibril Fal's presentation. He touched on a very important point that has actually been one of my favorites since I retired from active work. And that's the business of, the question of business on sustainability and continuity. Yeah. Because first generation businessmen have failed this country. They had all the businesses that we knew when we were growing up, apart from the colonial businesses that were owned by foreign partners, failed. It's a brutal word to use, but that's the truth. And that is because, in fact, I had the opportunity of developing this subject on behalf of the Chamber of Commerce and Industry some couple of years ago. And I tried to analyze the reasons why I thought the businesses failed. And this included parastatal organizations. I'm not going to go into such detail, but I think it is very important that if we must build a viable economy and a vibrant private sector, businesses should be sustainable, should be managed on a sustainable and continuous basis. And I think this is the message that Professor Fal probably wants to deliver, and I want to corroborate that message because we haven't got it yet. I have served in Nigeria, I have served in a few other African countries, and I know in Nigeria, for example, you talked about the Dantata, I can name many other industries that have survived with time, because they were organized and they were well structured. We are getting there now with the young businesses that are coming up, and I'm encouraged by that. But we need to get more of that going. On the question of housing, I'm very happy that Dr. Jones dwelled on the need to have controlled development in housing and also to take into account our environmental needs. But I am alarmed by what is happening in the Gambia today. I remember, and I think people like my Koto Hatibjane will confirm this, when I was building my house in the 1970s, we used to have overzealous building control inspectors. At every stage of the development, they will be there. You get your building permit, you dig the trenches, they come. They give you the go-ahead to go with the next stage. They pour the concrete on the foundations and start building the walls, they come. So at every stage of the development, there was control. And when you finish the building, they will have an inspection team consisting of fire officers, health service personnel, and building control officers. They went to the extent of checking on your soakaways. In fact, they had a standard design from PWD for your septic tanks and your soakaways. And when you satisfy all these requirements, NAWEC, before they will come and they will test the building for earthing to make sure the building is properly grounded before they install the meter. Sadly, all that has disappeared. They made sure also that there was space between you and your next door neighbor. But now what is happening is, you build a house, your next door neighbor comes, builds on your wall a kitchen and emits smoke right into your bedroom, and there's nothing you can do about it. So I don't know. I think what we need to do, Dr. Jones mentioned this, we have books, we have very strict laws on the statute books, but nobody implements them these days. I will not be surprised if people build houses now from start to finish without building permits. Or even if they have building permits, not one inspector from the housing department or physical planning department will visit the sites to ensure that the building is constructed according to the approved plans. So I think it's a pity that the government ministers are not here. But I think what we need to do is to strengthen the Department of Physical Planning and Development. And also take into account, if you go to settlements like Bijilo or Kersering, some of the streets are this wide.
Yeah.
There's no proper planning. It's all chaotic development. And what's going to happen in the future is, if we want to develop services, we may have to demolish a lot of these buildings to widen the roads, put in water lines, put in sewage lines, and so on. I visit Bahrain and Dubai and Abu Dhabi very frequently because my son works as an engineer in these countries. Lamin was in Dubai and he will testify to this. Before they start a housing scheme, what they would normally do is they will come and put the infrastructure in. They'll put the roads, they'll put the water lines, they'll put the sewage lines, the telecommunications lines. And when they give you a building permit to build, they make sure that you build what is approved. You don't change the plan midway without permission. So we have quite a challenge ahead of us in terms of housing development. Enjoyed Mr. Jobate's presentation, but I'm afraid it's not the model for Gambia. This is modeled on the American housing market. What we are dealing here is social housing. What we need in this country is social housing, not middle class housing. I think Dr. Jones made this point. And you cannot develop a viable social housing scheme without a suitable mortgage product. And I think Mohammed mentioned this earlier on. The only two institutions that do mortgage lending in this country are Social Security and Housing Finance Corporation and Home Finance Company, in which I think Social Security has an interest. But the interest rates are not affordable. I mean, how do you expect the driver earning $3,000 a month, or the nurse, or the teacher earning $3,500 a month to pay a loan of $1 million? Because this is, in my estimate, what it costs now to build a standard 3-bedroom house. No frills. How can you expect them to pay over a short-term period a loan of $1 million at 23, 24, 25% interest? It's not possible. So what we need to do is to go out into the world, into the streets of this world, and get soft loan financing facilities specifically for housing. We cannot use commercial money for housing. We cannot. Because if somebody deposits money with the banks, expecting a return of 16%, the bank cannot lend that money at less than 20 or 25%. So we have to get special funds for social housing. And in the absence of that, what we are going to get is potentially slums. They may not be as bad as Matare Valley in Nairobi, but they would essentially be slums because people sort of are just trying to make do. And sadly, the people who need the housing most, the lower income people, have the largest families. So I think this is a problem that I think people like Mohammed Manjang can work out very. We're sitting on millions of dollars of Social Security funds. Okay, I realize that some of these funds need to be invested to provide a return for people who are retired. But I think if the funds are properly managed also, we should be able to afford to subsidize housing for the low-income members of the Social Security and Housing Finance Corporation. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, gentlemen, for the very excellent presentation. Again, thank you also to Mr. Mustafa Njai of TAF Global Gambia for this opportunity. This is the third anniversary of the event. And it's a very good time also because Gambia has changed. And the hope is that with forums like this, with events like this, we can also see a qualitative change. Because there is a tendency now in the Gambia for us to think about our past as if it was an ideal. It was not. And we must learn new habits. We must try to do things differently. Because Singapore has done it, Mauritius has done it, China is doing it on a very global scale. But we must have a political vision that is going to transform this country. We cannot only talk about economics at the micro level, because I was very pleased that Professor Fall talked about institutionalization and the building of institutions. Of course, I have a direct question. Who should do this? Who should build these institutions? At the micro level, there has been a complete neglect of designing for the future. And Dr. Jones, you'll be pleased to know this year, through my little intervention, the President Barrow has rededicated the Banjul Declaration. And if you drive past the National Assembly building when he was doing the state opening of Parliament, the beautiful picture is there. I saw this Banjul Declaration as a schoolboy in Banjul. When we talk about sustainability, when we talk about continuity, we also need to understand that these paradigms that we have received from our colonial masters are no longer helping us. We must speak to each other not only forthrightly and frankly, but we must also speak in a language that we understand. Because a lot of things are lost in translation. We must go back to our cultural basis of our lives to be able to build a society that is not only progressive, but is successful. And the idea that the paradigms, the models that has worked in the past are going to work for the new Gambia is, in my humble opinion, I think it's misconceived and it's misdirected. I just want to conclude with this point because I noticed throughout the presentations, they're very excellent, I have to say. The role of public law, for example, was completely not discussed. The importance of public law in my mind is that, for example, when we look at public finance, all the taxes that we pay over every financial year, none of it is invested. And it could be invested. And again, like I was saying, Professor Fall has talked about alternatives, like cooperatives, like Islamic finance. All of these are things within our heritage, within our cultural matrix. It is a question of how do you leverage this? How do you build these institutions? And I think what my uncle Mutsengor has said is entirely true. This private sector development or private sector-led development of the Gambia is continuing to be a failure. Because most of our private sector operators, I say this quite authoritatively because at one point I was the chief executive officer of the Gambia Chamber of Commerce. They are not innovators. They are shopkeepers, they are money changers, and the greed that you talk about is because they don't have any big projects to propose. not only to the private sector, but to the country as a whole. And it is about time that we bring these ideas to the fore, not only at platforms like this, but to take it to government. Public-private partnership has been talked about so many times, but there has not been even one instant where the government makes an initiative. And there are many opportunities to bring about public-private partnership. So this space between what we can do for the future and respecting our past, how do we build sustainable institutions? These are, for us, the challenges in the new Gambia. And I hope that going forward, all this energy, all this enthusiasm that has been generated by the work of people like TAF and your very selves is going to lead to a Gambia that is not only cohesive, but also innovative. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Fell.
I think we should applaud them. I will start with Mr. Lamin Jobate for what everybody, I mean, when he was giving his presentation, I was like, is this wishful thinking for Gambia? Because this is not the Gambia that I live in. This cannot happen in the Gambia that we are in now. But then along the way, I said, why not? I was opportuned as a 3-year-old to visit Dubai. My mom was an air hostess, and it wasn't the Dubai that we all know now. So I'm like, when you were giving your presentation, I'm like, this can happen in Gambia. Why not? Why can we not make it happen? But then I said, growing up in Banjul as a child, all the businesses I see the Lebanese and now the Indians doing now were done by the Hatib Janes, the Fisco Conates. We grew up seeing the NPEs, the NTCs, the GPTCs, and the CUCs. Then the rubbish was being taken. So why can we not have the same Gambia that we had before? Is it because of corruption? Is it because of bad governance? And I think we have to say no and make sure we bring back the good old days. And when I woke up today, in fact, I came purposely for this, and I'm like, why not give the brother a chance? We have the TAFs. We must make sure that they succeed. If we can have the Dangotes in Nigeria, we can have the Mustafa Njais in Gambia. Why not? I think where there is a will, there is a way. And where we have them, I mean, I think it is very possible. Somebody said we need to balance the profitability and social benefits. But then also, we need to separate our business wallets from our personal wallets. Absolutely. I think if we don't, we cannot succeed, and then there will be no continuity. We always talking about continuity. I grew up, I was born from a family business. But where's the continuity? It is shameful to say that what the Gambians used to do, all the rice that we used to consume, was imported by Gambians. Now we eat imported food that are imported by Indians. Why should we let them? They have their countries to go to, and we have ours. And I think we should take care of what we own. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I would first of all like to congratulate Mustafa Njai and TAF Global for organizing this third annual event. And my questions are two. The first one is for Professor Jibril Fall. I want to know whether the Dangote business, is it a family one or an individual in the family? Because it's international now. That is one. Number two, I want to ask Dr. Dele, when he talked about climate change as being the cause of some of the natural disasters that are taking place, maybe in other places in the world, but in Gambia, maybe it's just the erosion, soil erosion in the beach. That's the only one we have that is natural. But all the others, the floodings and all these other things, is the lack of effectiveness of the physical planning section of the Ministry of Local Government and Lands, because they allow people to build anywhere, on waterways. If you look at Tobacco Road, if you go to Tobacco Road during the rainy season, just behind where I am, exactly, down inside, some of the places when it rains during the rainy season, because of the areas they have built in and the level of the ground, when it rains, the floods go right into the rooms in the houses. Some of the mattresses even float outside. Some of the times when it rains, they cannot cook because there is water inside the kitchen throughout. And in the combos in Manjai Kunda, Latir Kunda, and Sabiji, sometimes during the rainy season, it's the same thing like as Tobacco Road. When it rains, the flood goes right into the bedrooms, and you see the mattresses floating around. I think it's because of this is because physical planning is not actually setting up the houses in their proper places. They set them on waterways and on lower grounds. So if the physical planning do their job properly, I don't think those things will happen in the Gambia.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. That's it. We will not take any other interventions. We've run out of time. We'll only take this opportunity to thank everybody for attending and to the panelists for very insightful papers and discussions. I think this discussion will continue, certainly it hasn't come to an end. I think what has come out is the need to institutionalize businesses that exist. I think there are name tags to businesses even now. But frankly, if we don't go to the next stage of institutionalizing it, we'll just end up what happened in the past 20 years. Having a business name is very different from institutionalizing that business for the sake of continuity. I think finance continues to be a challenge, and we need to find innovative ways of addressing housing finance. It's expensive, it's not available. I think 40% or maybe 60% of housing here is done through savings, individual savings, and maybe to some limited extent, some companies that will allow lending, but otherwise it simply does not exist, and it creates the challenges of having housing in this country. And I think all of those things, conversations hopefully will continue outside the forum, but this we have to bring to an end now. And again, I thank you very much, and the panelists, thank you very much.